everybody, and welcome back to What to Watch. I am Clint Gage.
And I'm Jackie Jing, and we got some Pokemon experts in the house, Joshua Yale and Sydney Goodman. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Hi.
Which is luckily your Pokemon experts,
Yeah.
because we're talking about Detective Pikachu this week. We've already seen it. We're going to be getting into some spoilers. So here's your spoiler alert for Detective Pikachu. Get out now if you haven't seen it. So, Pokemon experts. Josh, what's your experience with Pokemon?
I am a clinically diagnosed Pokemaniac. I have played, the core games, pretty much every spin-off I can get my hands on, the Pokemon cards. And I'm not talking about as a kid. This is now. This is last week,
Current Josh.
This is how I spend my spare time is Pokemon. So I'm fully inundated in Pokemon. So I was a little skeptical going into this movie of just can they do it? And they totally did. I was just infatuated with the live action Pokemon. I thought they adapted it with such love and care and authenticity. And the plot was a little sketchy, got a little convoluted, but I really wasn't there for the plot. I was there for the Pokemon. And this movie sent me to Pokemon heaven.
Okay, Pokemon heaven.
On
yeah.
the top of that. Okay, so I love Pokemon as well. I've played all of the RPGs. I play them every time they come out, and I always choose a water starter for my first run. I replay Gens 2 and 3 anytime I go on vacation. I just really like those two. And then I've watched the anime. I've watched the first run through. I know that there's more, but I've watched the first main anime. You probably know what I'm talking about.
The Indigo League.
The Indigo League, thank you, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. So going into this movie, I also am a hater of live action adaptations. I just generally don't like them.
Video game adaptations?
No, just live action adaptations, period.
Of anything.
I think they're a bad idea.
Got it.
And I went into this kind of tempering my expectations, but I love Pokemon, so I was like, okay. And I was really surprised how much I loved it. I thought it was so cute, and just the universe was so real, and it was what I want, and I want it to be real so bad. With that said, I will echo what Joshua said. The plot was very convoluted. I honestly could have done without the plot and would have just taken a Planet Earth style documentary of Pokemon. Here's the ones in the grass, and here's the ones in the water.
Just 10 hours worth of prestige
Exactly.
nature doc.
Exactly. The whole movie, I was kind of just ignoring whatever was happening and was just into whatever was going on in the background. But I thought it was really, really cute. As a skeptic, I thought it was really, really cute.
Cute. Jackie, what about you? What are your Pokemon bona fides?
Okay, so I played Red and Blue when I was a kid. I was into the trading cards. I really liked the show. Still know all the words to the opening theme song, which is absolutely the best. So I would say I'm mild. For me, when I saw the movie, I was just in nostalgia heaven. I was just Pokemon heaven a little bit. It was just oh my God, Jigglypuff singing. Oh my God, it's an Eevee. Just seeing them brought to life. I was just totally thrilled about it. But the plot was all over the place in my opinion. So
I don't know anything about Pokemon.
Yes.
And I thought the movie was fine. That's
Fine
really all I can
meaning-
offer at this stage.
fine meaning.
It was fine. I have no knowledge of Pokemon to fall back on to just sit back and enjoy the bliss of Pokemon heaven, like you, Joshua. But let's get into some more specifics about Detective Pikachu. But that's where we all come down on Pokemon. But there's some talk with Pokemon Detective Pikachu about it being potentially the first good video game movie, right?
Yeah.
So what can other video game movies learn from what Detective Pikachu did right?
I actually think Detective Pikachu nailed this fan service. I don't want to talk too much about other video game movies, but I think a huge fault is trying to be the endemic fan base would love this or they'd love that, and then it coming off as some corporate executive making those decisions and feeling really inauthentic, and there being this huge disconnect. And Detective Pikachu didn't have that at all. It felt super genuine. It felt like the people who were making this film clearly understood what the fan base wanted out of the first time that we're seeing live action Pokemon in a live action Pokemon world. And I think they nailed it. Like I said, I would be happy just watching the world.
It also helped that Detective Pikachu was based on a game, Detective Pikachu, that most people really didn't play. Like, some people did, but it wasn't like one of the big core series hits that everybody plays. It was sort of like a side spin-off, and I think the movie could use that to its advantage because it approached the Pokemon franchise from a unique, different angle. Like, you're solving a mystery and gathering clues. You have this like very interesting lead character who's a talking Pokemon, which we're generally not used to unless you're talking about like Meowth or something. So yeah, I thought it took all that to its advantage and had a really interesting take on the Pokemon brand.
It gave it some focus too, and because the Pokemon world is so just sort of sprawling, there's so much going on in there that to give the movie some focus on kind of this more sort of obscure corner of it, I think it helped.
Yeah, because normally you're on this like sprawling adventure through a new region, catching all these different kinds of Pokemon and trying to get all the badges, Elite Four, become the champion, all that stuff. But this is like solving one case.
It's tough to build.
It's very personal.
Tough to build a 95-minute movie out of sprawling.
Right.
Yeah,
like if they did that, we'd have like Ash getting his first badge, then it'd be like end of the first movie, right?
I'd be totally down for like a whole anthology of just like Ash going to each gym.
Pokemon Cinematic Universe
What
in
I
live
want.
action, it could
That's
happen.
what I want. I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, and I will say too, because Pokemon is such a really specific world that people are very specifically into, and it's one that I've managed to avoid completely. I got it. Right, like I understood the dynamics that were happening between some of the characters and some of the Pokemon. Like I of course I didn't know any of the Pokemon's name, but I understood the world that we were living in, and it didn't bump me at all that there were just these weird little monsters running around with everybody, directing traffic and all that stuff. So, so even for a complete outsider, like the world building that they did was absolutely spot on.
I want to ask you about Mr. Mime because I know you had a very strong connection with that character, which I think all of us did. I thought Mr. Mime was one of the best parts of the movie.
He was my favorite part. That was a sequence that, I don't know Mr. Mime at all, but like it was hilarious. It was a legitimately wonderful sequence that had a lot of, it was fun for literally anybody. So in terms of that, like, steeping a video game movie in the culture of the video game and of the video game fans, they did a good job of, I think, balancing it pretty well.
But another thing I think they did really well is that they the authenticity and how loyal and faithful. Like they didn't, I think the new Sonic movie is a great example of like they changed it and warped it to was almost a little like too unrecognizable, and people had a really negative reaction. But they got it so right and were so accurate that fans really appreciate that. So I think it's that combination of going into a new direction while also being very faithful that people really appreciate about a video game adaptation.
We're talking about like a lot of the things that they did right and what we'd like to see in future video game adaptations, but there were some missed opportunities that we talked about. Clint, you want to start us off on this one?
Missed opportunities.
You're talking about character arcs. You thought that they could have been developed more.
I think for me, watching this just as a movie and not a Pokemon fan, I feel like Tim, the main character, had a lot of things that they set up for him that they just didn't follow through on, like on a character base. And so a lot of his stuff felt like it got left behind. And for me, like it was a main character that didn't have anything to do. And there was a nice little symmetry with the villain plot as well, with the father-son dynamic that was happening over there that was just kind of left doing nothing. And so I feel like for a movie like this to break through with non-Pokemon fans, I think there were a handful of missed opportunities on a character level.
Well, Pokemon's all about evolution, right? And so we see that he...
Felt like a no-brainer to me. Like he needs to become I was like in the beginning of the movie, he's like, oh, great, he's going to become a better version of himself.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't.
He just kind of like trips along this journey, and you don't. I personally didn't see like a huge amount of growth. It's like, yeah, he's establishing this relationship with this Pokemon, which we find out is his father, but it just like you never saw him have these moments where he was like, okay, like I need to overcome this, or like I don't know. I know this sounds silly, but there's those moments in movies where it's like the lights go on them, and you just see like this like moment that they like really get their mojo, or like they're suddenly like they get their identity or something. And I was just kind of like, okay, cool. Like he's just going along with this, and what's happening?
I don't know if maybe I'm part of the problem in that like I am the fan that they're thinking about when they're like too much Tim, because I kind of was like every time he opened his mouth, I was a little bit like, dude, get out of the way. Like, you're blocking my view, man. Like, I really couldn't care less about you right now. And I think it'd be different if it was Red or if it was Ash Ketchum, where we're these established characters that I did care about. But at this point, like, I was at that movie to see Pokemon come to life.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I might have been that fan that they were thinking about when they're like, oh, well, fans aren't coming here to like go on Tim's journey.
And the thing
Yeah.
is, like,
I don't know.
I don't
True.
fault them for that at all, because I think ultimately you're right. The reason that I call it a missed opportunity is that, like, it wouldn't have taken much. Like, you don't have to rearrange.
Totally.
Yeah,
you don't have to
totally.
get in the way of the Pokemon to have Tim have an interesting
Yeah.
story.
I think there was an arc there, and I felt emotions during this movie. I don't think it was as clear as it could have been. I think the way those emotional beats were spread out throughout the movie was maybe not correct in that, like, there's that scene. Well, we know Tim has problems. His mother died, and that caused like trauma. Where it happened at the point in a person's life where he would become a Pokemon trainer, and so he became estranged from his father and estranged from Pokemon at the same time. And so when this thing happens, he has to go to Rhyme City and be surrounded by Pokemon, meet Detective Pikachu. He starts to learn about Pokemon companionship, and I think the movie becomes about companionship. And there's that scene later when they're on like the bench together, and he's like crying, and Pikachu's like consoling him and giving some like pearls of wisdom. And then that's when they first connect, and he learns what it means to find a companion and have a Pokemon partner. And so I thought that was like a really nice moment. But then from there on, they drop all the mom stuff. Like, she seemed like a really important pivotal character who we're gonna like learn more about, but they just drop it there. And then later when Pikachu finds out that he thinks he betrayed Harry's dad, and then Tim loses Pikachu, and so he just learned to like open up and, you know, trust a Pokemon, and then like this happens, and he feels like he's let down and betrayed and loses it. And at the end, they have an awesome action scene to get back together and save the world, and then you just forget, and you're like, wait, what was happening? And so yeah, it does kind of go off the rails a little bit.
It feels
But
like
I did feel have an emotional, you know, resonance for that.
Yeah.
And at the end when like Pikachu is Pikachu again, and he just goes like Pika, and I was like,
Oh my gosh, you
I
just
did the
saying
same
that.
thing.
Yeah, I was like,
I did the same thing, Joshua. There were so many moments where I was just like, oh.
like the three Pokemon fans just went and
Yeah.
then Clint goes,
yeah. I was laughing at your tears.
Okay, so we have to talk about this though. The first Pokemon live action battle. Thoughts? Because I got mixed thoughts on it. So yeah, you go first.
When you think of a live action Pokemon
Yeah.
battle, you think it's going to be like in the anime and like in the games, like
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be this action packed, awesome, epic, like high stakes battle, and they're gonna be like shouting commands and doing all this
Yeah.
stuff, and it's gonna be really cool and get to use all their signature moves. But what we got was a subversion of that. But obviously, this is a movie that is having fun with the idea of Pokemon and wants to subvert expectations, and it's essentially a comedy. So they did give us a Pokemon battle, but they had a lot of silly things happen where like Pikachu can't attack, and he's like, I can't do what people are watching,
Yeah.
and like Tim ends up like getting in there and like stomping on the Charizard's
But
tail.
we were talking about that. Like, what?
That would kill the Charizard.
Don't do that.
The flame goes out.
Well, and everyone else was okay with it. Like, why are you doing that? Please stop. Like, I just.
That could have gotten dark real fast.
Yeah,
for real.
But
Dead Charizard.
it
man.
ended up going on in this crazy off the rails thing. But I still thought it was really cool. But yeah, it wasn't quite like the badass battle we maybe had always dreamed of from when we were a kid.
Well, I was telling you, we had that scene when Tim's on the train and it's like showing some like educational video or something. And then it's like, and then there was a time when they battled each other. And we see like the Pokemon Stadium and it's like setting up the stage for this like epic battle. And I literally like kind of got up on the edge of my seat and then he throws the Pokeball and I'm like, and then it just like faded away. I was like, okay, well, we'll get more of that later in the movie, so I'm not worried. And then it just like never happened, and I was really sad.
It was interesting though, because like from a narrative perspective, like at that moment for that fight scene to be an absolute cluster, like
Yeah.
made sense to me. And
Yeah.
so like all that whole sequence played out pretty appropriately, I think, but like
Yeah.
within the context of the movie. But yeah, it was. I did have the thought. I was like, I don't know that this is how fights are supposed to go. So
I didn't take like personal offense to it. I was like bummed
They
as a
meant
fan
personal
that I
offense to
didn't
you.
get to see it. But I don't know. At the same time, I kind of respect the restraint of not giving everybody everything that they want up front.
I really liked it. I think if they had just done a standard battle, it wouldn't have fit the movie. I think that's for another movie. Who knows? We might get another, spin-off where it is about battling and like collecting the badges, going through Kanto and stuff. But yeah, that wasn't this movie. For what Detective Pikachu wanted to be, like that was like I think that was like, the perfect way to approach that.
I know I had plenty of moments in the movie where I was like, plenty of WTF questions for me popped up in the movie. Everybody else around me seemed to be enjoying them, so I wasn't super worried about it. But do we have any just straight up WTF questions about the movie? And by we, I mean me, because my first one is Mewtwo a god? Is he like a full-on
He's always been
all-powerful god
insanely
thing?
powerful, but this movie like took it to a new level for me. Like I was like, okay, he can transfer souls, and then like the ending was just like tidied up way too easily. Like I forgot who turned to him, but they're like, "Can you fix this?" And he was like,
He's like,
"Yup,
"Sure."
I got you guys." Yeah, and then it was just like a
Yeah.
arm wave or something, and then big balloons started deflating, and everyone transformed back, and I was just like, "Wow, okay, that's simple. I guess he's just that powerful." I don't know. You're the expert.
Well,
you explain.
In the anime and in the games, he just is a psychic and telepathic Pokemon who can like move things with his mind and shoot energy beams and stuff. And that was always the limit of his power. But he was always very powerful and was like a legendary Pokemon, like pretty much the all-time like greatest. But in this movie, yeah, they went way above that, and we're like, okay, now he can move souls and like combine people with Pokemon. That's a new one on me. As a person who's been following Pokemon from the beginning, I was like, dang, they really just went in a new direction.
Just
and
a real blank check of a character,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
I feel like their whole thing was like, well, he's has the special thing that we were doing, like the research or
Yeah.
whatever. Like he has extra powers.
DNA from
to
an
me,
ancient
that felt like
god
what
or
they're
whatever.
like. Right? He has
Yeah.
extra powers. Let's end the movie now.
Yes.
Like that was kind of what it felt like. Because no, he shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
It was insane. Like I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that was a big. That's
do all
a
that
true
now. Like,
WTF question
Yeah.
for even Pokemon vets are like, oh, what now?
yeah. Sydney Torterra, like, what the hell is going on there?
So there's the scene where, they show like the little Torterra, and you're like, haha, just you wait, because there's no way this is it. And then Psyduck uses Confuse or whatever he does, and then they're pissed off, and there's like this giant earthquake, and it becomes clear that there's like a bunch of very, very large Torterra. And my question is like, okay, and then they just are going back to sleep.
They just
and-
kind of sit down afterwards.
yeah, and like, shouldn't you alert people this seems dangerous? Like, you don't want to build on them. You would hurt them. Like, there were just so many layers of questions where everyone just seemed like, oh, well, they're not moving now. So, like,
Yeah.
it's
But
fine.
it's
We're good to go
coming on the
now.
heels of a sequence in a lab where they were seeing all kinds of experiments on Pokemon to accentuate their powers and all this stuff. And then this isn't like contained in a lab. Like there is a literal mountain range of Pokemon just like out the back door.
Yeah. And they just walk away. Like, they just walk out the little...
I thought that was actually very humorous.
They just,
That
like,
is- well, that was crazy.
they just
I
sort
was
of
like-
casually walk out the hole
Yeah.
that they cut in the fence that
Or
they
even
came in.
that Tim, like, Pikachu was like gonna faint. I don't know what the analogy would be in this movie, but he was like not doing well, right? And so like Tim and Pikachu have this experience. Oh my gosh! And then the woman whose name keeps escaping me,
Lucy.
Lucy just pops up and she's like, "Oh hey guys, let's get in the car." And I'm like,
Yeah. Hey, what's wrong with Pikachu?
"Are we gonna ignore what just
Yeah.
happened?"
Nobody's like terrified the fact that there's like giant, essentially like Pokemon kaiju. That,
Yeah.
should look what happens next time they wake up and they decide to walk into a city or something. Like that's a
Yeah.
whole other movie.
Yeah. We also need to talk about Rhyme City in general. It was really funny. Jim, one of our coworkers, who was like, so this is so nice. Like in Pokemon, like they just live in harmony and you find a Pokemon and you guys become best friends. It's like what the games are about. And I was like, no, actually, like you have to like use a Pokemon, beat them up, and then you capture them. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And then they're like in your collection. And he was like, this is wrong. I don't like
from,
this
from
anymore.
the outside looking in,
Yeah.
there's some dark threads to pull on with Pokemon.
But Rhyme City's completely different, right? So
Right. So it's weird by embracing how nice it is in Rhyme City for Pokemon to be treated as equals essentially and be, recognized as partners. They don't have to live in the Pokeball. There's no battling. The Roundhouse, they do have battles. But that's like underground, like seedy battling. That's not like culturally accepted there. But then that shines a light on how bad like battling and stuff is in general, and how so you're saying outside of Rhyme City, like Pokemon are essentially like slaves, and they're like essentially it's the dog fighting thing of like they're forced to battle like for their trainers like amusement and betterment, and Pokemon are like hurting each other and like biting and setting on fire and like poisoning and paralyzing them and doing all these things for sport and for competition. And so suddenly it's like, oh wow, just when you look at Rhyme City, how could we ever be okay with what we understand to be the core like Pokemon experience?
It's a strange indictment of literally the rest of Pokemon, as far as I can understand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And actually, okay, so you brought up the battle that we saw, obviously, was kind of like illegal. It wasn't really chill. And what does that mean for like experience points and leveling up and like how do you evolve? Like it just brought up a lot of questions for me. I mean, as somebody who my core Pokemon experience is with the games and like leveling these people up, like, well, Pokemon. What?
So the,
like, how
the
does that
question is,
work?
if everybody's living in harmony and nobody's fighting their Pokemon,
And
how
how
do the
do they get
Pokemon
that
level up and
experience?
advance
Yeah.
and get?
Yeah, how do
Totally.
they evolve? How do they learn new abilities? Like,
Well, I guess you have a
It's
couple
just
exceptions.
another way to keep them down, man.
Like we saw that Eevee evolve into a Flareon, which
But that's
you
with the
used
stone
with a stone, so
anyways.
that's a workaround. But
But
you're
that's-
right, for something like a Machamp, which we saw there
Yeah.
on the road, how did that evolve if it wasn't allowed to battle?
Yeah.
There's a scene early in the movie that takes place on a farm where there are clearly just Pokemon around, no cows, chickens, anything like that.
Yes.
And then when we get to Rhyme City, there's a lot of Pokemon in the service industry. A lot of Pokemon like waiting tables and stuff. What do they eat?
So actually, I want to read an entry from the Pokedex where about Farfetch'd, which is like a duck Pokemon who carries this leek that he uses to attack people with, like a stick. So it says, a wild duck Pokemon, Farfetch'd, makes a delicious meal, especially when cooked with leek.
Oh my god, no!
Because of this, Farfetch'd is nearly extinct.
Cooked with his own tool?
I
His
was
own
just-
weapon?
Oh my god, it's being encouraged in the Pokedex?
I know, right? They like have cooking recipes in like a tab on the Pokedex.
I also love the idea that some Pokemon are like delicacies, right?
Pokemon are food.
Magikarp,
Yeah.
Tauros, we were talking about that earlier. You could eat those too. So, but
Which
in this
again, like-
world, maybe they're all vegetarian. Sydney suggested that earlier. Maybe
That's
it's
a
not
possibility.
like
Like
that
right
in
for
the-
Rhyme City or Rhyme City specifically, like maybe there's just like a don't eat your Pokemon.
Oh, God.
Okay, everybody, it is quick picks time, and we decided to pick some movies and some shows that pair very well with Detective Pikachu. So who's first? Who's going first?
I'll go first.
Oh, she's confident. Okay.
Like it.
It's because I don't have very much to say. Because once I say it, you're gonna be like, "Whoa, I should
Got
watch that
30
movie."
seconds.
Does it start when I start talking?
It does.
Digimon the movie. All I have to say is, first of all, bare naked ladies. Second, there's a really good villain. Third, it's a good movie. And I know that there's some debate between like, oh, Pokemon versus Digimon. Why can't you love both? This is a great way to get started. It's a fantastic film. Travel back into the time that this film came out and watch it because it's really good. Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are the champion.
Josh, what do you got?
Okay, do I do it to this camera here?
Right here.
Okay.
You got 30
Are you
seconds.
guys ready? Do I go? Now?
Go.
Do it now?
Now.
Okay. So I think you should actually watch The Cat in the Hat, which I understand is a horrible movie, but it's like so bad it's good. But it's also a live action adaptation of a kid's property. The fish is like this digital creature, so he's kind of like an animated like Pokemon type thing. And in like Ryan Reynolds' humor that sort of walked the line of risque and then sometimes blew right past it. Mike Myers, his humor was like all over the place. A lot of it not for kids, a lot of it for adults. So it's a great thing, and you should watch it. You should watch it. You should watch Cat in the Hat because it's great.
Okay, well, I'm going to choose Castlevania, which is dark and gory and really tragic. But they're video games, right? So I absolutely adore Castlevania. I think what they did really well was that they took these awesome characters, this awesome world, and they do a little bit of fan service, but then it's like just this epic story, and it's just like vampires and then the Belmonts with their like whips and like potions and like cool stuff. So it's just like this absolutely badass, awesome world. Vampires, vampires, vampires.
Fighting monsters again.
I know. That's
Back
all
to
I
your
pick
bread and
is
butter.
monster fighting stuff. Okay. Okay, what's yours? What's yours?
I am choosing what I think is the most obvious choice, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? It's a detective story that's a live-action animated hybrid, and frankly, I think it did it better than Detective Pikachu. It was also a technical achievement at its time. It was a very difficult movie to make in so many ways. There's a fascinating backstory on how the movie came together, but it's a great like film noir. We talk about creating a world that is sort of accessible in multiple ways, so it like blends some good genres. It's a great story. It's funny. Live-action animated hybrid. Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Nice. Okay.
I'm gonna
Good
throw a
picks, guys.
shrug in there at the end.
Yeah.
Just
Good time for a shrug.
Yeah.
so that'll do it for us this week on What to Watch. Make sure you follow us on social media with the hashtag Jackie.
IGN W2W.
Right, Sydney,
David
Josh,
always
thanks for being
makes
here.
that face too. He's like, don't do it.
Follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Clinkage.
I'm at Jackie Jing.
Oh, at Joshua Yale.
That's it so good.
There you go,
There
and
we
we will
go.
see you guys next week. Bye. Oh, you guys are waiting.